All right. Why Work is Getting Worse by Second Thought. God, you guys always want me to watch these sad videos. You just want to watch me break apart on 4K television. Oh my God. All right, let's watch
This
it.
episode is brought to you by
it.
Nebula. Stay tuned for an exciting announcement at the end of the video. And snag a little discount when you sign up with my link. Work is getting worse.
It's true.
I know that might sound strange. We're very attached to the idea that things just keep getting better for every new generation. Like how before, there weren't any iPads, but now...
Okay, so it wasn't better for every generation. So he's about to bring up an iPad example. This is, how would I say, a different description for every person you ask on the face of the planet. What is somebody's version of better? For me, it would be, yeah, like now I can get an iPad, right? But if you ask somebody in a third world country, maybe it's now I have flowing water that's fresh and I have accessibility to and able to drink. So my point, and that's two extremes, right? From one to a huge extreme. But my point still stands, and that description changes based on who you ask of what better is. What is a improving lifestyle? Also, on that, why work is getting worse. Okay, so what do I have to do to get those things? A mailman in the 1950s could get, a home, feed his wife, feed 2 kids, white picket fence, the American dream, the whole shit show. I make way more money than a mailman did in the 1950s, obviously accounting for inflation. But we've inflated to such a point that his life, with the available amenities at that time, is theoretically actually better than what I have today. Obviously, you have modern medicine. I'll let him cook. I'll let him play. I'm getting too much into it.
We all have iPads.
You can play Fruit Ninja.
Fruit Ninja. Sadly, that steady march of progress narrative doesn't really hold up. Of course, a lot of things are better now than a few generations ago, don't get me wrong. However, the unfortunate reality is that there's a disturbing trend with work today. New jobs are declining in quality across a lot of different and incredibly...
You have people pissing in bottles at Amazon. We have child labor in backfuck nowhere, Alabama. Tell me it's getting better without laughing.
Important metrics. And you probably already know that. Odds are your job sucks. But it's often hard to take that personal experience and put it in the context of a whole economy.
My soul.
Because whatever you're picturing, however horrible you're imagining the general state of work being, I guarantee what I'm about to talk about is a lot worse.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to measure job quality, but the most obvious one is money.
True.
Jobs don't pay as much anymore.
Bingo.
For starters, pay has not kept up with productivity.
Oh, I can't.
We
I love you
produce
brought out
far
the
more
graph.
goods and services per hour than we used to, and up to the 70s, this increase in productivity tracked almost perfectly.
So we're the titty, right? So this is you. You're the booba. And this is the company, and they're squeezing every last drop of milk out of you. Every single bit, but in compensation, all you get is more squeezing of the tit.
With an increase
They're just
in
draining
hourly
you
pay.
dry.
More productivity equaled more money in the pockets of workers. Since then, however, productivity has gone up.
So in 1973, people realized, hey, we could just fuck them, and then it's fine. What are they going to do?
Every
Nothing.
year by around 75% between then and now. But hourly wages have only risen a tiny 9%. So, where's the money gone? Unsurprisingly, most of the profit generated from that increase in productivity hasn't gone to workers. It's been captured by the 1%, whose wages have fully gone up an insane 138%.
So in one of my other videos, I talked about how funny it was. People get depressed and mad that stuff like this happens, and I think it's funny, and I think it's actually ingenious. The creative ways that these big businesses find to bend us over and really just slam a jam it to us and take everything for what we're worth. Honestly, I feel like I'm being pimped and I didn't even sign up for it. It is such a cultural disaster that we experience this on the day-to-day. It's ingenious. It's brilliant. You can't, I'm not even mad about it. It's so funny to me.
That's kind of abstract.
The ways they
Let me
fuck
put it
me.
in more concrete terms. This inequality has cost what most Americans consider middle-class families $18,000 a year, $76K instead of $94. But you're clever. You look at the graphs and you see that even though inequality is some of the worst it's ever been, the line at the bottom is still going up, even if just barely. But does that mean wages are rising? Not really. For the bottom 50% of the population, in other words, the average American, pre-tax, pre-benefits income has actually gone down by over 6% since 1980. And that's before you factor in the cost of living. That means things like inflation, which we'll get into later, but it also just means what kinds of expenses people are now responsible.
So obviously there's inflation, but on top of this, there is a added CEO tax, which triples the amount of inflation. I mean, just think about, like I said, I brought up the mailman. Think about what a fry cook in the 1950s could do with the available products out there at the time and compare it to today. They could buy a house. They could live in a home. They could support a family. The threat of starvation wasn't always looming over their head.
Responsible for that they didn't used to be. For example, since the 80s, employers have cut down on healthcare benefits. They've also made job training increasingly an individual responsibility. Student loan debt has only gotten bigger, the cost of not getting a college degree has only grown, and yet the benefits of having one are only going down. And this is...
I'm in a job that technically requires a 4-year degree. I have a 2-year degree, and I got it from a community college. So it did increase my wages, quite a bit. But I would almost argue for some fields that require it, it's really about who you know. If you know people in that industry, they're going to give you the job if you have a charismatic attitude and they like you. It's literally a popularity contest for the majority of this. And I know it sounds like a meme, but I'm not even kidding. Most of my success is because I made somebody laugh at a joke I made.
Isn't just in education.
Not that I'm
People
more qualified.
are needing to take on a lot more
that I'm
debt
funny.
for just about everything. And I do mean need. Prices on essential goods way outpace wages year after year.
Yeah.
So just to get by, credit has become an essential part of a home budget. This is part of a larger trend within neoliberalism, where responsibility and cost for all sorts of things, like job training, healthcare, and retirement, are shifting increasingly onto the shoulders of individuals who are making less and therefore need to resort to debt to get by. Today, the average American has 90 grand worth of debt hanging over their head, and debt as a...
I'm actually in active Chapter 13 bankruptcy because I have about $80,000 worth of debt, so I am a statistic. I am one of the bumps in this log. How about that?
Percentage of income has only gone up since the 50s. All this has another effect on work. Not only do we work for less on average, we also work longer. Year over year, working hours in the US have actually remained relatively stagnant. But because wages have gone down in practical terms and personal expenses have gone up with the gutting of social services and costs borne by employers, we spend more of our lives at work. Over the past 30 years, the average age of retirement has gone up from 62 to 65.
In America, we have this grind set, rise and grind, giga grind, whatever you want to call it, mindset where you constantly have to... I have Microsoft Teams, Outlook, I even have Excel on my cell phone. I'm always accessible because I'm a salaried employee. Even if I put my out of office on, people will still contact me. And it's bundled into the salary package of basically that's the ultimate pimping, right? So, I mean, even as an hourly worker, it's like you have the state protecting you, but if you take hourly, you're actually making less depending on the job you take. So salary, it's like you can choose to be hourly and have some rights and make no money, and then you're basically just poverty, or you take salary and you get pimped out to the next CEO. That's your choice.
Fall, Republicans actually started floating a plan to push retirement even later by delaying when people can receive full Social Security benefits and Medicare. I actually covered this topic about a year ago, but these kinds of policies actively target poorer Americans who rely on Social Security and are way more likely to die before reaching retirement age than their wealthier counterparts.
This is, like, I know a lot of you read my descriptions, like, you see, I'm 29 years old, plan to die by 30. there's a part of me where that's not a joke. I kind of hope I just die sometimes. And I know, like, I'm not suicidal. I don't have a suicidal thought. But I just kind of want to just naturally die. I just want it to be over. And we call it quits, go sleep and never wake up kind of thing. And get me out. I want to opt out.
Just so you get an idea of how prevalent this trend is, the same thing just happened in France as we were putting this video together. The country is on fire because, despite disapproval from the overwhelming majority of French people, the neoliberal President Macron raised the retirement age by going around the parliament. Like the Republicans did in the fall with their plan to make Americans work longer, Macron cited budget concerns and the upcoming insolvency of these retirement funds.
Bro.
But make no mistake, the reason retirement funds are going to be insolvent isn't because people aren't working hard enough, but because the wealth that they produce isn't going in their pockets or into funding these necessities. It's going to billionaires.
Oh, we
but
love billionaires.
Let's get back on track. None of these trends are helped, by the way, by another aspect of job quality that keeps declining: security. More and more people are being brought into more precarious work on an intermittent, irregular, or contractual basis. The new name for it is quiet hiring. But for years now, companies like Uber and their gig economy clones have been selling it as flexibility. Jobs are less secure today than in the past.
What did I say? Creative ways to pimp out the working class. How do we get them hoes? How do we get them hoes on our block? This is how they're doing it.
You're more easily fired. Protections for workers are less well enforced under contractor status. Unionization is either impossible or downright illegal, and neither pay nor benefits are nearly as good, with the latter rarely ever being provided. And it's not restricted to just one or two sectors of the economy. These jobs are everywhere. 53% of people between 18 and 34 and who work in the gig economy do so as their primary income source. And according to a Princeton study, 94% of the net employment growth in the US between 2005...
If you're watching this video, there is a high chance I make more money than you. And I'm not saying that to flex. I'm saying that because I, for about 2 years, had to do Uber Eats. Because I needed a way to make extra income because the burden of bills became so much for me that the only way out was either death, bankruptcy, or another job. And before then I didn't take the bankruptcy because I actually cared about my credit. Now I got a house and I'm locked in, so it's like, send it, right? I don't even care about anything anymore. So I did the bankruptcy, but for a while I did Uber Eats and just to survive. And I know, like, other people are in worse situations financially than I am. And I don't even know how they do it because I'm barely doing it. I'm barely holding on. Like, if one thing goes wrong, it's over. I don't even know what happens if one thing goes wrong. And that looming pressure is literally the thing of my nightmares.
And 2015 has been in, quote, alternative work arrangements, meaning independent contractors, temp work, and freelancing are basically the only new jobs our economy is producing. The consequences are bleak. Unreliable work comes with a lot of insecurity. We know that capitalism regularly spirals into recession, around every 5 years at this point. So with the likelihood of a recession in 2023 seemingly really high, 80% of US...
Bro, the only thing recessing around here is my freaking hairline, okay? Like, the more... it's just so doomed, bro.
Workers, according to one study, is worried about losing their job. Regardless of the exact number today, this kind of anxiety about job security under neoliberal capitalism is always widespread. And it's another variable that makes work worse and makes wages stagnate. Workers are constantly worried about keeping their job, so they exercise wage restraint. They don't ask for a pay raise despite needing it because they're worried it could get them fired. This isn't helped by the fact that neoliberal politicians actively promote this wage restraint behavior by lying to people about the relationship between wages and inflation. In case you're wondering, by the way, wages and inflation aren't related. The wage price spiral is BS. You can get a raise without making inflation worse. Here's a study on that. I think I forgot to print that one. Okay, here we go. Proof is on the bottom of page 5, top of page 6. We got too many printouts here. Let's move on. Look, if that wasn't enough, kids aren't being spared from declining job quality either. Child labor laws are starting to come down all across the country. According to the Economic Policy Institute, 10 states are introducing or have...
This is psychotic. You want to talk about a recession? We are regressing to a point where we're bringing the Industrial Revolution back. We need to get these kids in the mines. They yearn for the mines. They yearn to mine coal. Minecraft? You want to talk about a conspiracy? We made Minecraft to bait the kids into wanting to go to the mines. I'm just kidding. That's some QAnon shit. But this is crazy!
Already passed legislation weakening child
God.
labor laws, despite the fact that violations of child labor protections are actually on the rise. Saying it like that is a little vague. Let me read you some details off the list of these bills. In Arkansas, a bill was passed that eliminates age verification and parent-guardian permission requirements. In Iowa and Minnesota, bills were introduced to lift restrictions on hazardous work. And in all these states, bills were introduced or enacted that extended working hours for minors. And I know that right now...
They are literally getting the parents to pimp out their children to the corporation so they can afford to feed the kids. The kids are starting to earn their own wage. I feel like this is maximum dystopia, right? What is happening?
Now, you're probably thinking of kids in their late teens working the register or in fast food kitchens.
Nah!
Jobs that are grueling,
Get
but
the
often
5-year-old
depicted
in there.
as easy. Those aren't the only jobs kids are doing right now, and they're a lot younger than what you're picturing. For example, in their report, the EPI mentions violations happening in meatpacking facilities, where over 100 kids between 13 and 17 are working illegal overnight shifts, handling dangerous chemicals, and, quote, cleaning razor-sharp saws and other high-risk equipment on slaughterhouse kill floors.
Yeah, it's the thing is it's cheaper to replace a 13-year-old's finger. There's less meat because they haven't fully grown, so they can fix it a lot easier. It's the medical bill's a lot cheaper. So, when they inevitably get something chopped off, it's less to replace.
It's giving the 21st
I
century
like
a
that.
real cool retro 1900s vibe. But it gets even worse in
That's
agriculture,
cute.
where 33
Isn't
kids
that
are
great?
injured
Isn't that
every
something?
day in the US, because so long as they have parental authorization, 14-year-olds get to use machetes and work with dangerous pesticides for unlimited hours with barely any sort of safety regulations in place. Oftentimes, by the way, making less than minimum wage. How fun is that? Speaking of demanding work, let's turn back to France for a second, because they actually measure the intensification of work over there. Back in the 80s, around 12% of French salaried workers had a physically strenuous job. Now, 40 years later, with all the developments we've made in automation that should make work easier, that number's gone up to 34%. And it's not just physical strain. Over the same time period, the number of salaried workers with a mentally strenuous job went up from 6 to 35%. If we can assume that these numbers...
I challenge you to go on the street and ask somebody if their job is mentally strenuous. If you receive a no answer, I enjoy this, I want to do this, I'll give you $100. I challenge you.
numbers are relatively generalizable to
Most
a similarly
people will
developed
say
country like the
it's
US.
fucked.
More Americans, contrary to the popular narrative, have harder, not easier jobs. By and large, the increase in productivity, the leaner operations, and the more efficient pace of work that came with advanced technology mean a lot more intensive a turnaround for workers today than at any other point in history. But let's give up the national lens for a second. A lot of the idea that work keeps improving probably comes from the fact that the US has moved from a manufacturing and manual labor economy to a service economy, jobs that are widely and unfairly considered easy. But let's, for the sake of argument, say they are easier. Just because Americans aren't in factories as much as before doesn't mean those jobs have disappeared. Work hasn't gotten better. All that's happened is that these factory jobs have been thrown onto other people's backs who just happen to live in other countries. We didn't transition.
And that's what I meant in the very beginning by it depends on quality of life, like who you ask. If you ask an American, it's going to vastly change from somebody, in Western Europe or Eastern Europe and then even Asia, right? So it depends on the region of the world you're asking of what is a good quality of life, what is improving. Because I guarantee you, it's terrible for everybody, but it might be a lot worse for somebody else.
Into a service economy by eliminating factory labor, but by having wealthy countries force open foreign markets to American and European capital so that they could be the ones to take on this burden. Because when companies move their manufacturing overseas, it's usually to take advantage of lower wages and less stringent safety requirements. Once again, worsening job quality. What most of these trends find in common is the shift in the balance of power away from workers and towards capitalists, the owners of businesses. The more power capitalists have, the more they're able to extract profit from workers by any means. Hence, jobs get worse. As evidence of this shift, just look at unionization trends. Since around the 60s,
Amazon tried to unionize. I'm pretty sure Jeff Bezos almost walked in there with an AK-47 and killed them all. I bet he was that close, bro. For legal reasons, that's a joke, of course. But bro, they busting unions. They busting them asses. The hoe gets out of line, and sometimes you just gotta get a little mean, you gotta get back in those mines, boy.
unionization has gone way down, and in perfect mirror image, the share of income held by the top 10% has gone up. But this growth of capitalist power isn't limited to unionization. Capitalists in the neoliberal era have helped to elect politicians that weaken workers in every imaginable way. Politicians that strip away social safety nets, like Reagan and Clinton, that weaken bargaining power and defund the NLRB, like Trump, that force open foreign countries' borders to American companies, like what's happened in East Asia and Latin America. All of these things contribute to creating a more vulnerable, less powerful workforce that can be taken advantage of more easily, that is more likely to be unemployed or underemployed, that year after year has to contend with more and more obstacles to living a comfortable life. Through these combined efforts, capitalists are able to wield more power in negotiations with...
And that's the thing about capitalism itself is it's all run by, you have the Democrats and Republicans, obviously massively differing opinions most of the time, and the workforce gets caught in the middle of a dick size contest. And when you mash these ideas together, because we have a new president every 4 years, it creates this unsustainable clusterfuck of ideas that isn't free flow. And I'm not saying we should be a communist country, dictatorship kind of stuff, but there has to be a better way to have discourse, but make it make sense for the population. There has to be. Because what we're doing right now is just flopping our cocks everywhere, hoping something sticks.
Workers push wages down, strip their access to healthcare, union bust indiscriminately, and personally accumulate wealth at levels we haven't seen in all of human history. And none of this is to romanticize the 50s or some...
look at the most recent. Elon Musk is farming Twitter addicts with the blue check mark. Because they're going to pay for the verified check mark now. Now that they're like he's milking their sack, taking them for what they're worth. It's so smart. I'm not saying it's not evil or fucking crazy, but it's so smart. Like it's like the smartest. It's like an evil genius. Billionaires are evil geniuses.
Bygone era, by the way. Those were not good times for anyone not like this. Trying to turn back the clock isn't going to solve any of these problems. The seeds of declining job quality were already there back then. You recreate a New Deal social democracy in the US today, and within a couple of years it'll melt back into neoliberalism because it isn't a solution that takes away capitalist power, nor their need to make profits at all costs. The balance of power of the 50s was nothing more than a temporary compromise that only held while capitalists were satisfied. Bottom line is, we're not going to find a solution in some mythologized past. It's only going to be when people have actual collective autonomy to make economic decisions and aren't forced to generate profits for a small group of wealthy businessmen that work can actually and durably improve. If you only take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Your job will never truly improve under capitalism. So long as the profit motive is the guiding principle of every business, safety, working conditions, and basic human dignity will.
That's absolutely true. If the motivating factor for your job is profit, there is no world that it gets better for you as an individual. You will always be cucked and fucked for shekels on the hour. There's no world it improves for you.
Will always be an afterthought. If we want to get to a place.
Because your well-being is not profitable for them. The only thing that's profitable for them from you is how much work you can do. That's it. That's why you are seen as a number. You are a spec, you are a statistic, you are in a pivot table as a number. And I know this because I do it in a day-to-day basis. You turn employees into numbers to make bigger number good.
Place where we can take pride in our work, enjoy a good work-life balance, and use new technology for the benefit of all workers, capitalism needs to go.
It's a really good video. Yeah, I don't know. It's getting very bad. I feel like we're at an inflection point in history where people are kind of realizing just how bad it is. It's that people have been gradually getting depressed, but eventually it hits a breaking point, and I think we're very much coming close to it. It just needs to get better, man. We need to do something.